Hi everyone. So in this lecture we're going to be talking about how in the Hunger Games there's a very obvious role reversal between males and females, which is specifically prominent in Katniss's character when she's compared to male qualities, Theseus and Spartacus, and Bella from the Twilight series. Now I know that last one might have gotten you thinking a little bit, but I promise we'll come back to it and you'll understand where I'm coming from. So ever since the beginning of the book, when Suzanne Collins is giving a description of Katniss's character, there's no really heavy indication that Katniss even is a female character, except for when she mentions that Katniss's hair was put into a long dark braid. But other than that, there's no indication that is given to the readers that we're reading a story from the perspective of a female. And as Jessica Miller puts it in her work, She Has No Idea the Effect She Can Have, when we consider that both the desire to become a mother and keen attention to physical appearance are strongly prescribed for women in our culture, Katniss stands out as atypical. This is a concept that we've discussed a lot in class, that Katniss is not your typical hero, and that's mainly because Katniss is a female. I mean, how often is it that in today's society you see the hero of a story, the main character in a story is a female, a strong, empowering female character? Not very often. In the opening scenes of both the book and the movie, when Katniss and Gale are together before the reaping and they're talking about their future and their lives together, Katniss points out that she doesn't want to have kids because she doesn't want her kids to be born into the society that they live in that's government controlled, they can't do what they want, and they're ultimately going to be sent to their death. The stereotype of a nurturing mother is typically associated with warmth and kindness, and that's not really seen in Katniss because when her father died in the mine explosion and her mother completely shut herself out and shut off her emotions to her and Prim, Katniss had to be the man of the house, which is obviously a role that's most normally taken up by a man. Katniss became protective of everyone that she loves, and fierce protectiveness like we see in Katniss is normally referred to or associated with masculinity or a masculine character. But her protective nature is ultimately what leads to her survival and her success in the games. But her often, like, just not just in the games but before too, when she was living back at home or in the reaping when she takes Prim's position, her decisions are often life and death. They're not she's not very emotional and fluttery like a typical girl, a teenage girl is. She is fierce and decisive, and she knows what she wants, and she is very protective of everyone that she loves. And even when we compare her to Peeta is very emotional and expressive, and when they were saying bye to their family members and their loved ones after the reaping, Peeta wasn't afraid to show what he felt. I mean, he cried and he was very emotional, but Katniss refused to show everyone what she was feeling. She was only, like in what we see in the movie, she was only really open to Gale. She only really showed her fear to Gale because she wanted to be strong for Prim and her mom, and she was very determined to get her mom to think that she needs to be there for Prim. She can't just shut herself out if something happens to Katniss like it did to Katniss's dad. But that's not the same situation we see with Peeta. When they're in the train going to the Capitol to be greeted by all the people at the Capitol for being the tributes chosen for District 12, we see Peeta filled with excitement and everything, but Katniss is just shut out from her emotions, and she refuses to let people know like what she's feeling, but Peeta is actually trying to be smart, and he's already trying to win the approval and the likeness of all the other people from the Capitol in order to survive in the games. But Haymitch even remarks to her that she is like a dead slug, that she's not going to be liked by very many people if she continues this shut-out persona that she puts up, which isn't really typically seen in a female character. I mean, teenage female characters, like in everyday TV shows, in books and movies, in any teenage story, the girl is usually the one who is very emotional, very outgoing, very expressive of her emotions, and the man is the one who does not like to show his emotions. So on to Spartacus and Theseus. Jessica Miller also points out that Katniss doesn't have all of these masculine traits by accident. The story of Spartacus and Theseus actually did have a very heavy influence on Katniss's character when Suzanne Collins was writing the book. And Jessica Miller points out that Theseus took the place of one of his countrymen, as Katniss did for Prim, and then he slew the Minotaur and he rescued his fellow tributes, and Spartacus famously led a rebellion of slaves against the Roman Empire. And Katniss follows the same arc, according to Suzanne Collins, from slave to gladiator to rebel to the face of a war. And some of the points mentioned in that quote, like to the rebel and to the face of the war, that is actually referring to the later books, where President Coin wants Katniss to be the face of the rebellion and ignite the war between the districts and the capital. And once again, that's something that's not very seen very often, where a female is the one leading the war. She's the leader of everything. She's the face of the rebellion. That's not something. That aggressiveness is not typically seen in a female character. And she, just like Spartacus and Theseus, she does feel the desire for vengeance against wrongdoers. And just like the characters that she's based on, she asserts her own human basic dignity, according to Jessica Miller. And that serves as a spark that catches fire and changes the course of history for the people of Panem. So that the concept of Spartacus and Theseus and Katniss all relating to each other is the basis of the whole rebellion. And according to Amanda Firestone in her work Apples to Oranges, when The Hunger Games was initially published, there was a lot of relation seen between Bella Swan's character in Twilight and Katniss's character in Hunger Games. So to first be able to talk about the differences between Katniss and Bella, you have to understand how they're even comparable. I mean, I know what you're all thinking, because it was my initial reaction when I read something like this when I was first doing research. How can The Hunger Games, which is a book about a dystopian society and about the death of children and government control, even be comparable to Twilight, which is a romance story between a human and a vampire with some werewolves mixed in there somewhere. So again, as Amanda Firestone puts it, drawing from tenuous similarities between the two characters, popular opinion has elevated Katniss to a modern feminist heroine, but Bella, on the other hand, has been derided as Katniss's antithetical representation of traditional femininity. And we compare the area of like a female teenager within the two stories. Yes, Twilight is a typical romance story, where Hunger Games completely is not a romance story. Bella, they both have the love triangle surrounding them, and when they both have to confront that, Bella, she like drops everything else that's going on in her life to deal with the confusion of who does she want to choose, but Katniss kind of leaves that aside and doesn't let that affect all of her decisions, because she knows that there's stuff more important going on than choosing who to date. Like, the Hunger Games has become such a popular aspect in today's society, and I think that's because she doesn't conform to societal norms of a female heroine, because I remember when Twilight first came out, it was a very big deal, but it was a very big deal because of the sappy romance story and not because of the empowerment that Bella lacked, which is obviously not something that Katniss lacks. So with all these ideas in mind, the gender role reversal is something that is very heavily seen in the Hunger Games, and it's not something that we can just ignore, because it is starting to shape our society, because like I said, the Hunger Games is something that's very popular in today's society, and it's because Katniss is the strong female role. I mean, that's not something that we see in very many books or movies or TV shows or anything anymore. And I know it's very hard to ignore everything that we see on social media nowadays, on Twitter, on Instagram, and everything. The whole thing with feminists gaining power or wanting equal rights and everything, and Katniss is, in a way, in real life, not just in the book, she's kind of becoming the face ever since the whole series came out and all the movies came out. She's been the face of feminist culture. So there you go, there's the gender reversal in the Hunger Games.